All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Into the Wind. So we are out here on the range, and we're going to put everything together, put it into practice. I'm actually get some shots down range and show you how this exactly works and show you the results of it in real time. Now, my Tacticam, the battery's just done on that thing, so unfortunately I can't get any through the scope footage. However, I've got my spotting scope back here that I'm going to have set up so I can get footage that way. And then what I'll do is I'll just explain exactly what I'm doing with the reticle. So what we went over before, if you look at the episodes prior to this one, that's definitely, if this is the first time you're seeing this, you're definitely going to want to start there, work your way through those videos. I do try to keep them as short as possible with just the information right up front so as not to, drag on an hour video that can be done in 10 minutes. So what we've talked about was getting our, doing our quick drop, meaning how to adjust for our range, right, without having to have a ballistic calculator on hand. So you're going to need the ballistic calculator. You're going to have some type of calculator to not just gather the information, but to put everything all into one place. Once you do that, you can select your numbers to make this method and this system work extremely accurate for you. So we went through how to develop, how to get all those numbers for your quick drop. And then the last several episodes, we've been talking about strictly focusing on wind, how to read wind, how it's going to affect your bullet, and then how to use all that information for what we call quick wind using our gun number. So this is a 308. I'm not exactly sure. I'm in the middle of switching bullets. I'm going to just stick with a 4 mile per hour gun. I think with the bullet that I have is going to kind of bump it up to that 5 mile an hour gun. But we're going to stick with 4 for the moment for the purpose of this video. So we're going to get our dope. We're going to get our wind, and we're going to get rounds on target down range. I'm going to do 2 examples of this. I'm going to do a 500 yards and 600 yards. I'm going to walk you through the formulas again, through the math. I have no ballistic calculator on hand. Actually, I do. I take that back. I have one in my pack. So what I might do is I'm going to run you through these calculations, and I'm going to compare that to what our Kestrel says. So I'm going to get them on target first, show how well this system works, that it actually does work, and why I recommend using it. Once I have everything done, I'm going to pull it up on the Kestrel and show you that it should be exactly the same formula. The first thing that we need to do is gather our environmentals, or at least for this this method, as much of our environmentals as possible. So we need to know the range to our target. We need to know the wind speed, the wind direction, things like that. So it doesn't matter which one you do first. The end result is to use these formulas. You have to know the distance that we're going to be shooting, and then we have to know what the wind is doing. So I typically like to do the distance first and run the formulas for that if I'm going to be doing formulas, and then do the wind. And the reason why is because the wind is going to change. Let's say you say, okay, it's a 5 mile an hour wind, right? You sit down, start doing your formulas. By the time you go to shoot, the wind's probably changed. So I like to do the wind last. I'll get my minimum and maximum base, and then I'm going to be filling out what it's doing at that time that I'm about ready to pull the trigger. Unfortunately for today, I don't know if you can hear this, but there's nobody here. That's a beautiful thing. That means I can make this video finally. But there is next to no wind. There's so little wind. I'm kind of standing out in front of the firing line. I can barely feel it. Like, let me give you an example. So we've got flags here on the tables, and they're barely even moving. And the little bit that it is moving, It's more just flapping as the breeze comes in. So it looks like I would say 1 mile an hour wind that we are getting. Like, look at this thing, it's not even moving. The 1 mile an hour wind that we are getting is coming from about 6 o'clock, which means that's not going to affect our bullet, left or right. So, um, unfortunately, this isn't going to go quite the direction I wanted to. I was hoping for, like, 10, 15 mile an hour wind. That way it can really show how this method is going to work. But nonetheless, let's sit down. Let's get our dope book out. Let's start going over some math. I definitely recommend having some kind of dope book. Write this stuff down in here. So let's do that. I'm going to use something like this right here, because I think we've got some square targets. So this is going to be kind of really like the closest thing I've got to what I'm seeing downrange. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just fill all this out so it has location, date, time, temperature, density, altitude, humidity, barometric pressure, distance, position, fire rate, and sling support, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go ahead and just fill all this stuff out. I normally don't go into that detailed of it, but I'm going to go ahead and fill this all out. I'm going to get the information I need and then run through the formulas. Once I have all that, I'll show you exactly what I did. All right, for our dope, the constant for my firearm is going to be 1.8 for my quick drop number. So what that means, at 500 yards and under, I'm going to use 1.8. What that's going to tell me is I'm going to take 1/100th of our distance. So 500 is going to turn into 5.0. And then we're going to subtract 1.8. Now I look at this is taking our first number, minusing 2, using our second number, and adding 2. It's going to equal the same, but for me, that's how I kind of run those numbers in my head. So at 500 yards, I'm going to take 5.0, I'm going to minus 1.8, or I'm going to, how I think of it, add minus 2 plus 2, and that's going to give me 3.2 mils. So my hold for 500 yards is 3.2 mils. So we're going to dial that into our scope. We're going to figure out what the size of the target is, and then we'll go from there. So here's the situation we have. Is I don't know the target, my target size in inches. So the formula we're going to run, I know that I'm at 500 yards. So we're going to use that same constant of 27.77. So at 500 yards, we're going to do 500 divided by 27.77. And we use our reticle and we milled the scope. I'm sorry, we milled our target, and we're roughly right about 0.6 mils. So we're going to do 500 divided by 27.77 times 0.6, and that gives me, I think it's 10.8. I'm going to go ahead and round that down to 10. I believe it is a 2 MOA target. So you can see we're going to have probably a little bit of an error in this, because I can't, the target is actually turned sideways. So I'm having to turn my gun sideways to try to mill across this way. So I've got a little bit of air built in there, but that gives me a 10-inch target, which at 500 yards is going to be 2 MOA. So we're going to move on to the next formula. we need to run our wind formula to get our 10 mile per hour wind. Now, the reason I like 10 mile per hour is because all we have to do is take our decibel, move it over one place to the left, and then that gives us our 1 mile per hour wind. However, if you have a constant wind and it's not really fluctuating, let's say maybe it's fluctuating between 3 miles an hour or something. If you're shooting within 800 yards, you can just use that, your constant wind. So let's say it's 10 miles an hour, or let's say it's 12. Right? You can use 12 miles an hour, do this same formula, and get an exact wind call. However, if you use 10 miles an hour, move your decimal over, that gets you your 10 and your 1 mile per hour. And then you can use that and add and subtract what you need to get your 5. Take your 10 mile per hour wind, cut it in half, you get your 5. And then you can add and get your 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, get your different wind all the way up there. So what we're going to do, the wind formula is going to be your wind speed. We're going to multiply that by our gun number. So I'm using a 4 mile per hour gun. We're roughly between 1 and 3 miles an hour. I did feel some gusts up to possibly 5 miles an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and do the formula through 1 to 5, but we're mainly in between that 1 to 3, and it's definitely a constant on that kind of 1. Not a lot of wind today. but it's our wind speed divided by gun number times 1/1000th of our distance. So we're shooting 500 yards. That's going to give us 0.5. And then we're going to multiply that by our cosine. Now, in this situation, it's coming directly behind us, so we're not going to have to adjust for a cosine. Now, if it was coming, let's say 1230, we're going to multiply that by 0.25, which is going to be 20%, 25% of our value. At 1 o'clock, it's going to be 5.0. 50%. So if we got a 10-mile-an-hour wind, we're only going to calculate for 5 miles, or we would go ahead and calculate for the full 10-mile-per-hour wind, and then whatever our value is in mils, we'd cut that in half for half the value. So in this situation, 500 yards, we got 10-mile-per-hour wind divided by 4, and then we're going to multiply that by 0.5, giving us 1.25. I would round that up to 1.3, but for a 10-mile-per-hour wind, that gives us a hold of 1.25. That's a full value. Again, we have wind from 6 o'clock, so that would essentially give us no value. But now we take that 1.25, we're going to take our decibel, move it over one place to the left, and that's going to give us 1.25. So every 1 mile per hour at 500 yards, we're going to have 1.25 of a hold for our mils. Okay, so now that we know that what our 1 mile per hour wind is at 500 yards, we're going to go ahead and just do the math on that. So we're going to take our 1 mile per hour wind and add our 1 mile per hour wind, which is going to give us 0.25 mils. So with a 2 mile per hour full value wind at 500 yards, we're going to hold 0.25. Again, I would round that up to 3. At 300 yards, we can just take our 1 mile per hour wind times 3, or we can take our 2 mile per hour wind and add 1 mile per hour wind, giving us 0.375. Now, again, I would round that up to 0.4. At 4 miles an hour, it's going to give us 4.20, but we know this is a 4-mile-an-hour gun, so at 400 yards, every mile per hour is going to equal 1/10 of a mil. So at 400 yards, it's going to be 0.425. I'm sorry, 0.420. At 5 mile per hour wind is going to be 0.545. So it just goes right up the thing. They're very nice and easy. So let's go ahead and get on the gun and take a shot. Again, the wind's coming from behind us, so this isn't exactly the results I wanted, but this is the results we got. Let's make a hit. All right, so going 500 yards, I got everything dialed in. Drop is going to be 3.2, and then we might be holding, we're from 1 to 3 miles an hour wind at 6 o'clock, we might be holding 0.1 at best.
This gun's so freaking light.
Yeah, my proof is the same way. It just bounces right out of there.
What's your proof? 6.5?
Yeah, I actually looked at the 300 TRC on that.
Okay, so just for expediency, I went ahead and did the math. We're going to take a shot at 600 yards. It's going to be so from center, it's going to be the third plate on the right. I estimated it roughly about 10.8 inches. It might be 11 inches. So the first thing we do is we know we're at 600 yards, so I laser ranged it. So we're going to do 600 divided by 27.77. When I milled the target, is roughly 0.5 mils wide. So we're going to multiply that by 0.5, and it gives us an answer of 10.8. So we should be about 10.8 inches. Again, that's 600 divided by 27.77 divided or times 0.5 for a 10-inch target at 600 yards. So this is a little bit under 2 MOA. It is one of their smaller targets. And then as far as the distance, 600 yards, we're going to make that 6.0. And then this is where in my, for my gun number, not for the wind, but for distance, where I bracket. So it's no longer 1.8 because it's further past 600 yards. It's right at that threshold. We're going to use 1.7. So again, I look at this as we're going to take 6.0 minus 1.7, or we can look at it as 6.0 and then minus 1 plus 3, which is going to give us a dope of 4.3. As far as the wind goes, again, we're going to use our 10 mile per hour wind. So we're going to do 10 divided by our gun number, so 4. 10 divided by 4 times 1/1000th of our distance, which is 600 yards of 0.6. So that gives us 10 divided by 4 times 0.6. It's going to equal 1.5. That's our 10 mile per hour wind full value hold. Our 1 mile per hour wind is going to be, we're going to move that decimal over to the left, so it's going to be 0.15. Now we are starting to pick up wind just a little bit downrange. I believe it is open, so we kind of have a tree line that goes down right around that 600 yard mark. There's a tree, a line that's cut across this way. So this is where we're gonna have to look at the mirage a little bit, see what the mirage is doing, because where I'm at, we're getting, again, 1 to 3 miles an hour, except we are now getting it in right about 430. So this is where our cosine is gonna kick in. So let's head back to the table. We're gonna run that formula real quick with, so we're actually getting about, let's say pretty close, about 330, which is going to give us 90%, 96% value of our win. So almost a full hold. So for easy math, we're going to call that 3 o'clock. I mean, because going from 96 to 100%, that 6% not going to affect us much at 600 yards. It will, but I don't know if it'll be enough to actually dial. But as you can see, when I'm reading the wind, I'm actually just turning into the wind and facing it. Right towards you is where my gun is. So you guys are 12 o'clock. I'm turning 90 degrees to you guys. And if I move my face just a little bit, kind of getting a little bit of a breeze there, but then it just goes away, and then it feels like it's coming back from 6 o'clock. So it's somewhere between like 3:30 and I would say 5:30, but it's so slight that I can barely feel it, and it's also hard to tell kind of where it's coming from. So that's one of the things we got to keep in mind. This is one of the reasons why reading the wind can be extremely difficult, because if you look back here, there's nothing but trees. So that's definitely going to block that wind. So it could be a 3 mile an hour wind down that way, but because behind me, where I'm standing at least, this is blocking the wind from me. So this is the things that makes it, difficult. However, you're going to just do the best you can using this formula, and we're going to take just the best educated guess that we have. So let's go ahead. We're going to get back on camera and see what this hit is going to look like with this formula at 600 yards.
Stationary rising.
I don't want to say that this is easy. Nothing's easy if you don't know how to do it, but it doesn't have to be extremely hard. It doesn't have to be extremely difficult. We can definitely make it a lot easier with these formulas. So the best thing to do is go home and just practice the wind formulas, actually practice the math, writing them down so you can memorize them. I would recommend doing this during our dry fire practice. That's where you're going to get really good and very quick at doing this, is in your dry fire practice, making I would call it a formula chart, have these formulas on there. So that way, if you get out to the range and you forget one of the formulas, you can go right back to your formula chart. Make sure you have the formula. What I do is I put it in bold letters. I do the formula, then I do an example at the bottom. That way, if I do forget it, I've got something to refer back to know exactly what it is I'm looking at. Okay, so let's look at our ballistic software. So we had 500 yards. We're dialing 3.2. However, the last time I shot and everything I did with my ballistic data, it was a lot cooler. So it is, 70, it's almost 80 degrees today. So I would expect to dial down, like a tenth of a mil. So what we have on here, when I run it on my Kestrel, we have 3.11, and for wind from 1 to 3 miles an hour, 0.1 to we'll call it 0.3. Now on the ballistic calculator, it is going to adjust for things like aerodynamic jump, spin drift, and Coriolis. So that's already metered into here. In our formula, we don't do that. What I do is I just memorize at 500 yards. That's where I got to start calculating for the spin drift. But there it is. I think it's actually backwards to you guys. It's backwards to me. And then let's go to 600 yards and take a look at that as well. So I think we had 4.3, and yeah, we got the same thing. So 4.26, we're going to round that up. See if you can see it, to 4.3. And then on our wind, 0.2 for 1 mile an hour, 3 miles an hour, 0.3. And again, this is adjusting for some other things, but we had I think I was dial. I didn't actually dial. I did dial for spin drift. So it's a right hand twist. We're in the northern hemisphere. That's going to appear that my bullet's going to go to the right just a little bit. So I did come back. So to the left, a tenth of a mil. And other than that, I didn't really. I was kind of floating just a little bit. Pretty much, I just held center, and then I was floating like a quarter left or a quarter right on the target, depending if I felt the wind pick up just a little bit. It is coming from over this position here. It's coming from about roughly 5:30. I'll say 4:30 to, or I'm sorry, 5 to 5:30. So very minimal on the wind. It's only going to be about 25%. So I pretty much just held dead on. But you can see with a 308, I've done this with my 6.5. This formula works very, very well. But there it is, nice and easy. And if you can learn to do the math, which is very simple, then you're going to do the same thing. This has nothing. Let me take that back. This has I don't want to say it doesn't have anything to do with skill. It definitely does, the fundamentals of marksmanship. However, it does take a certain skill set to read the wind. The rest of it, though, is just math and understanding that math. So until the next video, guys, thank you so much for tuning in.